So if you wouldn't mind just starting us off by telling us who you are and what it is you do.
Right. Okay. Well, my name's Brendan Wise. What I do, I would say primarily I am a dressage and jumper trainer, as well as a little bit in the hunters. Do a lot with both teaching as well as competing, and also a lot of exhibition and clinics and expos and that sort of stuff. My original background kind of comes from the Western horsemanship, Western performance, and problem horses sort of background. So that's what led me initially into more expos and clinic type of a venue. And over the years, took a deep dive into the dressage world, the classical dressage world, and then eventually took a deep dive into the show jumping world and have found a real big love for the show jumping and show jumping horses in general. So it's the main part of what I do now is train show jumpers and train my students for competition and recreation and such, and teach and just pass on what everyone else has passed on to me, and hopefully do the best that I can with it. So that's kind of the goal of what we do.
Awesome. Yeah, so for the listeners, I came across a video of Brendan riding a horse in I believe a meter 30 show jump course with no bridle.
Yeah.
And to me that just screams good horsemanship.
Well, thank you.
Um I I have an eventing background.
Right.
I show jumped as a junior,
Okay.
and I actually had a thoroughbred that I would not say trained, but kind of just as a ballsy teenager rode tackless. And
Sure.
um, so I've always kind of had a soft spot for very minimalist approach. And
Right.
so if you could just kind of talk about what what led you to jumping bridleless in the first
Yeah.
place?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so going back to my original kind of background in problem horses and Western performance, particularly things like the reining industry and such, riding bridleless was a part of things that I would do regularly in the horses
Mm,
that I trained and in exhibition and performance and such. Especially when it comes to a good reining horse, a really good reining horse at any time, you should be able to take the bridle off and run your pattern for the most
mm,
part. So in that world, I wouldn't say it was anything too much of a wow factor. It was natural. It was a natural occurrence of the training, but certainly it's fun to do in exhibition. And I would perform at different expos and rodeos with quarter horses that I had, particularly one quarter horse colt who was kind of like my best buddy for the 15 years that he was on this earth. So that's kind of where it originally started, was the bridleless riding that way, and that was without anything on their face or a neck rope or anything. That was just me in
mm,
the saddle, voice and leg and seat, and just running reining patterns. Really is what we did in that context. So years down the road, I meet my ex-wife, and I'm performing with Colt, and she has a really troubled horse that had some real severe aggression problems and fear problems. And working with her, and she, to her credit, kind of developed a little bit of a bridalist system on her own that she used two dressage whips to help guide him as well. No neck rope, just two dressage whips. And they got to the point that, I mean, she was kind of interested in eventing and hunter jumper, that kind of
mm,
stuff. So they got to the point that through, guiding them through those concepts, they started to jump around a little bit that way. So she's the one that really got me to pursue jumping more,
mm,
and have an interest in that, and eventually more even out of necessity, because at that time I was mainly focusing on dressage and classical dressage. So a lot of my students started to become eventers and show jumpers that wanted to improve their flat work and wanted to improve their rideability and coursework. So I would teach them not on the jumping side, but on the dressage side. And then eventually I got to the point where it was like, well, they're really asking for it. I guess I need to learn something more about this show jumping. So took a deep dive into that and found out that I just fell in love with it. So as things grew on, it was just natural for us to start to pursue more bridalist jumping. Now, my ex-wife, she had a horse that we acquired, who was a very troubled horse. He was a very, very difficult horse that was given to us, and I restarted him and I handed him over to her. And he was kind of like a failed jumper that had been sold as a dressage horse and kind of failed at that life too. And so he came to us unsound mentally and physically.
Mhm.
And it took us a while to get him back to health. But when we did, we started to work and she started to jump a little bit and found that he actually was quite a spectacular jumper. But very anxious, very hot, a lot of rideability troubles. And even though they were successful, it wasn't always pretty and it was just very anxious. You could tell inside of him there just was so much anxiousness and nervousness in the way that he attacked the courses. So she lost the horse that I spoke about before, the kind of more aggressive one that had some troubles. She had just lost that horse and thought that she would never have a bridalist jumping horse again. And then Wings stepped into the picture, and we were preparing for an exhibition to jump bridalist, but she had just lost her bridalist horse, so she was like, "Oh, maybe I'll try it with Wings, see what we can do." And really spent about 30 days devoted to it, and we found that he was more relaxed that way, and he was better that way, and he jumped better that way. So there's kind of a whole big story of then she goes on to the Pennsylvania National Horse Show and in the bridle, and it goes awful. It goes as bad as it could go in the bridle. After spending a month without a bridle in his mouth, she goes to this show and completely bombs out. And the Washington International Horse Show is the next week, and we're like, what in the world do we do? And it came down to a decision of we either go in the bridle and it probably will go bad,
Mm,
or just maybe we go bridleless and we have a shot of it going better and
mm.
him being a happier horse. So as crazy as it sounds, the first time she rode a full course competitively, bridleless, was at the Washington International Horse Show on the big stage. And so doing that, making that decision kind of sent both of us as partners into not really a tailspin, but it really kind of put things on the map for us as far as what we do bridleless, and taking that jumping. We've always been people who were not anti-bit, we're not anti anything in the horse's mouth, we're not really anti anything. We are for whatever works best for the horse.
Mm,
And for some horses, we've found bridleless works best for them. And we've found that for most horses, cross training it makes them more relaxed and makes them jump freer and makes them more independent and secure in their job. And it teaches us so much about how we ride
mm,
and the different things that we can do. When I start to learn how to bend and balance the horse and collect the horse and posture the horse and have all of these things that I would require in the bridle do the same bridleless, then it really changes your perspective as a rider and
mm.
the way that you approach the jumping. So more than anything, we see it not as exhibition or fun or games. We see it as a viable means of riding in competition. So we approach it that way, and we try to take it into competition that way.
Interesting. So, I would assume w so what makes a horse a candidate for bridleless? What makes you go, "Let's just try it without the bridle?"
Right. Really kind of all of them. Really kind of all of them, but particularly, we've found oftentimes the ones that are, um, anxious, have a bad relationship with the hand,
Mm, mm,
maybe the bit, or gaping mouths, pulling, afraid of the bits, nervous chomping. I've found that particularly oftentimes one like that, or ones that are just very insecure in general,
mm,
those are ones that I tend to highlight and say, hey, this might be a good thing for them. Not always for it to be full time. Some
mm,
are that way. They just go better that way.
mhm,
But others, maybe it's a good way to cross chain and see if eliminating one of the variables
mhm,
might change the outcome a bit. I have an interesting situation with a student down here in Ocala right now where a horse was having a lot of stopping troubles and a lot of troubles inside the bridle, just in the way that he was relating to the bit. So one of the first things that we did when we came down here is I just want to see, let's take it off of him, let's ride him, let's work him. And he's a sensitive guy. He's a really sensitive type of a horse, which is a gift and a curse at times.
Yeah.
And sure enough, took the bridle off, took a session or two to school him, and within 2 sessions, we're jumping around full courses at a meter, if not more.
Mm.
And he is more calm. He's more confident about his ability to take the jump himself, and just a better way of going all around. Not, I didn't expect to take that one into competition that way, but I did find that it helped him to
Yeah.
have that freedom and understand that he can do things on his own. Yeah.
Interesting. And what does the process from going to bridal from bridal to bridalist look like?
Yeah. So, we start out with the bridle on or a halter on or something. I would say that I at least like the horse to be comfortable walking and trotting without bucking me off. That's if they can at least do that, then I can start to pursue working bridleless, at least in its more primitive early stages.
Mhm.
So I'll start off with the neck rope on them at the same time that I have the halter or bitless bridle or bridle, whatever you're normally riding in, that they can go around, at least walk and trot without bucking me off. Um, and the very first important thing that they have to learn is to yield to the pressure of the neck rope, to
Mm.
understand that when they feel that pressure on the base of their chest, on the base of their neck, that they are supposed to yield away from that.
Mm.
Similarly, as you would with a bridle or a bit or a dressage whip or anything, teach the horse to yield away from pressure. Same thing happens with the neck rope. It's in that most primitive form. They learn that's your break.
Mm.
They're gonna feel that pressure and they need to be sensitive and respond to it in some way. So I start with the backup. I start with teaching them to back up from the pressure
Mm.
of that neck rope. And then we can start to put, when they're very confident with that, we can start to put together steps where they, take 2 or 3 steps forward, then go immediately to the backup, rest. 2 or 3 steps forward, immediately to the backup, rest. For me, with bridleless particularly, there's really no such thing as stop. There's forwards and there's backwards, and we rest. I want the horse always to be thinking that when it feels the pressure of the neck rope, there could be the possibility that we need to back up
Mm.
at this point. This comes into play later on when jumping courses. I need to be able to, jump into a 4 stride line or a 2 stride line or anything like that. And if I pick up on that neck rope, I need the horse not to blow through me, but
Mhm.
be able to sit their body up and relax their body and adjust that stride. So from the very first moment that I educate the horse to those first few steps, my brain's thinking ahead to, down the road, I might jump a fence into a line with another fence to go. And instead of this horse running through me, it needs to be sensitive and soft and
Mm.
relaxed in the way that it responds. So that's where we start, and then we introduce a little bit of turning, similarly to what you might have in like a Western neck rein. The horse tends to respond in the beginning to the pressure on the outside of their neck, guiding that outside shoulder to move with the neck rope. Later on down the road, a lot of the bridleless riding comes a lot from the voice, the seat, the leg, riding the horse into the contact of the neck rope, but very much like training a young horse in the beginning, they have to learn the language of the bit. It's important to guide them. Same thing here, the horse has to learn the language of the neck rope, at least to learn to stay in between it and be sensitive to it. And then things refine and develop from there. So the very first phases are, the backup, some turning, and once I have that, once I feel confident that I can get the horse to yield and turn and back up off the pressure of the neck rope, then usually I'm ready to go ahead and take that bridle off and walk and maybe trot around and test that out a little bit in an enclosed environment, in an arena. There's fences. If you ride bridleless enough, you're gonna get taken off on. It's just the way it is. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You hope it doesn't happen, in an unsafe context or while you're out on course in front of thousands of people, but it's gonna happen. So always safety first for sure.
And are you doing all of this from the saddle, or do you have a groundwork component
I
also?
do all this from the saddle. When it comes to introducing the bridalist work, I pretty much all do it from the saddle.
Mm,
There's not really any particular groundwork that I do to help the horse prepare for it.
mhm.
Usually, like I said, as long as they can walk and trot and not buck me off, then I'm ready to start to introduce neck rope pressure and then refine things from there down the road.
Mm. So, as you get into the competing aspect of this, are there I know there are bit rules and all sorts of things. Are there any hoops you kind of had to jump through to show up without a bridle?
Yeah, so in US show jumping,
Mm,
it's perfectly legal.
mm,
Most other competitions, it's not. Dressage, no. Hunters, no. Eventing, no. You know, most other English disciplines, it is not legal. There is language in the rule book that requires reins attached to a headpiece of
mm,
some sort. Now, there's not really anything to say that you couldn't have that in place and still just ride with the neck rope. It's not impossible.
mhm,
Complicated, but not impossible. However, in US show jumping, both to its benefit and to its detriment, there's almost virtually no tack rules.
mm,
I can ride US show jumping bridleless and bareback if I want to. We've done it in age-rated shows. You know, we've done it. So there isn't many laws against much of anything tack-wise in US show jumping.
mm.
That makes it fun because I can go bridleless.
Yeah.
It's not so fun because we see absolutely atrocious things
Mm,
on horses' faces to try to control them. So it's a little bit of a gift and a curse there. But yes, U.S. show jumping, it is perfectly legal. Oftentimes, in the beginning, we would contact venues and
mm,
say, "Hey, this is the way our horse goes. This is the way we find he does best. Here is video of us doing it so you can see that it is safe and it is controlled and that it rides okay." Um, as with anything, it's up to the steward's discretion. If we go
mhm,
to a venue and the steward is like, "I don't think this is safe," they technically have the grounds to say, "I can't compete that way." Even though there's nothing in the rule book that prohibits it, the steward can make that judgment call if they feel like I'm unsafe to the riders around me or
mm,
myself. We've never had that happen. And you know, there was a rule change proposed at one point. I think it was a couple years ago, maybe 2019 or 2020, something like that. There was a rule change proposed to USEF about banning bridleists, and that was
mm,
specifically targeted at us. Um, Thankfully, through the support of petitions and the board and everything, they threw that rule change
mm.
out. And I think really what a lot of it came down to is the fact that, let's face it, showing is expensive. Like, this is expensive. Who in their right mind would go out and try to do this and pay all that money if they didn't think that they could actually do it, if
Yeah.
they didn't think they could actually get around the course and be safe and not embarrass themselves? Like,
Mhm.
nobody's going to do this
Yeah.
unless they think they have the capacity to do it,
Mhm.
or maybe they're just crazy. I don't know. But
Which is
for the most
entirely possible. We are horse people.
there are horse people, yeah. But for the most part, I think people realize that this is way too expensive. This is way too dangerous of an idea for people to just do it on a whim.
Yeah.
So if they're going to step in foot into the ring and try to give this a go,
Mhm.
usually they're pretty prepared to do it.
So, what kind of, if any, sort of are there naysayers to bridalists?
Yes, yes, there are. Particularly in the beginning, we were treated horribly by
Mm,
other trainers, by other riders. Um, you know, when I was coaching Melanie and Wings at the Washington International Horse Show, the comments and the curses and the scrutiny and the way we were treated in the warm-up ring by other trainers was absolutely ridiculous.
mm,
Uh, you know, and that was really daunting. You know, people thought it was a joke. They thought it was a PR stunt. They, you know, every assumption that you could think of is what they were thinking. We were just trying to give our horse the best ride we could.
mhm,
That's really all it was. And that's what we thought was the chance to give him the best ride. And in the years to follow, we've been told that we're spooking somebody's horse because we don't have a bridle, that their horse is performing bad and spooking because we don't have a bridle on. We've had, you know, people say that we have an unfair advantage. How? I don't understand how. We've had, trainers send their students into the ring and say very seriously, do not let the bridleless horse beat you. Stuff like that. You know, there was under a lot of scrutiny, and the mistakes, if we made mistakes, which of course we do, you know, our mistakes are judged
Mm,
so heavily compared to any other horse that made that mistake, and the bridle or horse that was ripping their rider around like a rag doll, or falling through jumps, or running through jumps, or things that are just absolutely atrocious and out of control. People, it's just commonly accepted, it's going to happen. But when my horse spooks, or my horse stops, or my horse jumps through a line bad or something like that, or pulls a rail, immediately people jump on board with, oh, well, maybe if you had a bridle in its mouth, it wouldn't do that. So yes, it is scrutinized, and there's
yeah.
a lot of naysayers, and certainly there's a lot of people that believe that it can't be done at a high level, and it's yet to be proven that it can be done at a high level. I mean, obviously, Lyric and I are jumping around 130 in warm up right now. We've jumped 145 courses in warm up together at this point. We haven't done that successfully in the competition ring yet. Lyric's not an easy horse.
Mhm,
He is a peaky, spooky horse. So I know that we would be jumping around the 140s and the 145s together, bridalist, except for, he's got some fears and he's got some insecurities, and stuff scares him a little bit in the course,
mm,
both in the bridle and bridalist. And, when I'm in the bridle, I can take a hold of him a little bit more, and I can put a little bit more blood in him, and I can encourage him with the energy and the
mm,
ride to say, hey, we're going to get through this. It's a little harder to do that bridleless,
mm,
because there's only so far I can push him before I lose my sensitivity
mm,
to my stopping power, my braking power, my adjustability power. To
mhm,
just like the bridle, you can push a horse to take the bit and run with it. You can do the same thing, bridleless. They can get to the point that they take it and run with it. So I have to preserve the relaxation and the balance and the rideability. I have to preserve that as paramount in order to get around high level
mm,
competitive courses. So that makes sometimes when I, roll around a corner and his fence pops up and he's backed off, I don't have the same ability to overcome that
mm,
I would inside the bridle. Um, so it makes it more difficult, and it comes down to money too. I mean, you have one of those rounds in a big money class,
mm.
and it becomes an expensive show week. So the money is a factor. I
Mm,
would love to be able to be out there more often riding competitive bridleless courses, but we have to weigh the financial factor
mm,
of it as well.
yeah.
So yeah, that all comes into play.
Mm. So, knowing that there are a lot of naysayers, how do you mentally overcome that?
It's a good question. That's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down to, you just have to want it.
Mhm,
You have to be passionate about it. You have to believe that it's possible,
mm,
and you have to believe that you're doing right by your horse.
mhm,
Um, for Melanie and Wings, Wings hasn't had the bridle in his mouth since 2017.
mm,
Goes full time that way, and he'll never have the bridle in his mouth again.
mm,
He's better that way. For Lyric, he doesn't have to go bridleless. I think
mm,
he does very well that
yeah,
way, but he doesn't necessarily have to.
mhm,
With him, it's more personal. I think he goes well that way, and I want to show the world that it's possible,
mhm,
that there's a better way to
yeah,
do things. If I can go out there and if I can go out there and jump a 140 course, or a 145 course or a national Grand Prix or something, if I could get to the point that we're out there doing that bridalist, then maybe a few people step back and say, maybe I could do better, you
Hmm.
know? Maybe I could train my horse a little bit better. I could prepare my horse a little bit better, or the horse could be a little lighter or carry itself a little
Hmm.
bit better. Maybe it could just spark some ideas
Yep.
more than anything else. So I think I overcome the naysayers with just the mission and the goal to show that there's always a better way. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily saying the way that they're doing it's wrong, but maybe we can be kinder.
Mm.
Maybe we can be better at what we do. So that's kind of a personal mission for me.
Yeah, I think, we we all as equestrians kind of get on our either soapbox or our egos can't necessarily handle being shown something that's outside of our norm.
Sure.
And I think when you see someone, say you have a horse that's tough in the mouth or tough in the back or, whatever it is, and you see someone jumping around a meter 30 bridleless, it hurts your ego. And then you
Yeah.
feel the need to lash out against it versus taking the time to say, maybe not even that it's right for your horse, but just, damn, I can't believe someone's doing that.
Sure.
And, that was also part of the reason I wanted to have you on is I'm a uh I also work with a lot of problem horses, a
Hmm.
lot of, you know, special horses. And I had one and she had a nasty spin and especially hacking. And now these
Yeah.
are event horses, so it is
Sure.
very important that we go near the woods. And
Yeah.
she she loved cross country, so it was always like, okay, this is something we have to work through because she really enjoys this thing.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I had this realization that tack is pressure, if we want to think of it that way. It's this contact that we have on the horse. So when I started working through the hacking problem, I took all the tack off. I used a rope halter and immediately, like once she felt that little bit of freedom, I think it gave her the almost feel of control and
Hmm.
the spinning and I mean, she's still spooky-ish, but completely went away.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so it's fascinating to see, okay, here's another person with, you know, needy special horses
Yeah.
that is taking the pressure off, not
Hmm.
putting more pressure on.
Yeah.
And so, what is when you get a horse in that, say, is gaping in the mouth or has clearly had miscommunication with bridle,
Hmm.
if you think that, okay, so you cross train them bridleless,
Hmm.
say, then does riding them bridleless automatically just make them more secure with the bit?
Not always. It can. It can
Mhm,
in some ways. It can in some ways make them realize that they can make some decisions for themselves.
mhm,
You know, when particularly when I'm jumping bridleless,
mhm,
it requires me to, at least in the beginning, simplify things.
mm,
I have forward, backwards, left, right.
yep,
That's about it. That's about all I have in the beginning. It refines and it gets more interesting from there. But in the beginning, I have forwards, backwards, left, right. And everything has to be done in a similar fashion to a good hunter, in that it's loose rein, it's
mm,
minimal contact. If I hold on to pressure with the neck rope, I dull the senses out to the neck rope.
mhm,
Similar to the bit, we hold on to the horse's mouth, we dull the mouth out.
mhm,
So, out of sheer self preservation, I can't hold on to the neck rope. I
mhm,
have to release it. I have to get a response and I have to release it. So that means that the horse has to operate on virtually no contact.
Mhm.
It has to be consistent in its stride for it to work. It has to jump from maybe not always perfect distances and take care of itself
Mhm.
without a lot of help. So when you do that and then you go back to the bridle, sometimes the horse now has a renewed ability to know that neutral isn't me holding on you.
Mm.
Neutral is I've done my job.
Yeah.
Now it's time for you to do your job. So when I go back to the bridle, I then can start to school from a different perspective and say, okay, in a similar way, maybe we need to simplify once again the cues of the bridle: forward, backward, left, right. Stay between my reins. And you're going to operate on minimal to no contact. And I'm
Mm.
going to require you to learn how to keep your paces relaxed and consistent without my contact and
Mm.
without my help, which hopefully the bridalist has helped with.
Mhm.
And then I can add more ideas into it from there,
Mm.
later on as we go, preserving that neutral of self carriage and
Mm.
equilibrium and self balance and making some decisions on its own.
Mm.
No, it doesn't always directly translate, but I would say oftentimes you come on the other side of it with a horse that's a little bit more clear where neutral should be.
Mm.
And neutral is, him carrying himself without my help.
So, if you have a student and you're trying to get them to release, to let go,
Yeah.
how do you explain that to them?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Um, if I were to explain that to them, oftentimes a good way to do it is to put them bridleless and take their bridle away, and for them to have, strip everything away, and they have only the most primitive form of left, right, forward, and back,
Mhm.
and not being able to hold. So then they start thinking less about, pull this rein, do this, do that, and they start thinking more about what I'm feeling in the
Mhm.
horse's body, the changes that my actions, my cues are translating into the horse's body, into his feet, not just his mouth, not just his face, but into his body, into his back, into his withers, into his feet. So when their brain starts to shift away from treating the mouth and they
Mhm.
start thinking about what's going on underneath their tack, then I think the perspective starts to
Mm.
change a little bit. So when they come back to the bridle, they start to think more about the connection of their rein not being directly to the horse's mouth, but the connection of their rein affecting what's going on underneath their saddle. And that can make a profound effect on how we change the horse's way of going.
So, do you still ride dressage, or are you primarily in the show jumping now?
Yeah, yeah, I still ride dressage. Yeah, for sure. Both in the bridle and without it. The same
So,
thing.
the concept of round,
Yeah,
how do you accomplish that without the bridle?
right. Okay, so let's analyze a little bit of the how the horse achieves posture, how it achieves roundness. Um, we define it as a taking of weight more to the quarters. The horse is shifting that equilibrium that was, at first naturally a little bit
Mhm.
down this way towards the shoulders and getting it to neutral, and then starting to shift it uphill and backwards. So you have multiple elements of the horse understanding that contact into the mouth or contact into the neck rope
Mm.
is a lightening of the shoulders. It's not having to do with the mouth. It's translating underneath the saddle to the horse's back and to its hindquarters and to its feet to change something, and ultimately to the withers as well.
Mhm.
The horse starts to think less about the mouth and more about what it has to change in its body. So through that, you're able to then ask the horse to ride from your leg and your seat toward your hand,
Mhm.
and through an understanding of your hand,
Mhm.
the horse can change that balance
Mm.
to build the back up, to bend the hocks and the loins more, to engage the sacrum. All these things start to happen through
Mhm.
the feel of asking the horse to be able to go forward from the hindquarters, but still respond to the guiding
Mhm.
of the body and the hand. Same exact thing, bridleless.
Mhm.
Same exact thing. The connection of my neck rope is not unlike what should be the connection of the hand to the mouth,
Mhm.
except for it's a little bit easier for the horse to translate neck rope pressure into its body than
Mm.
it is rein pressure, because just by the natural circumstance of it, it's feeling pressure in its mouth. It wants to yield away
Mhm.
with its mouth, with its neck, with its head.
Yep.
That's just natural. So the rider has to educate the horse that the rein pressure isn't just about the mouth and the neck.
Mhm.
It's about a response deeper inside the body.
Mm.
And that can be difficult at
Mm.
times. It's easier in a neck rope. It's
Mm.
easier. The natural inclination is for the horse to yield its chest and its withers and accept more weight to the quarters when it feels neck rope pressure and when it's conditioned to that. So we can start to bring the concepts of response from neck rope, response from forward aids, engaging aids, and then using movements to tie that into muscle groups. An example could be shoulder in,
Mhm.
or counter shoulder in, or leg yield, or something like that. When I teach the horse shoulder in, or giravolte, shoulder in on the circle, something like this, when the horse does this position, this posture, it has the opportunity to, for a moment, engage muscle groups and engage a certain balance. I present the context of where the horse can find it, and then through the context, every once in a while, the horse might find it. And I can identify it. And I say, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, that's the muscle group we need to
Mhm.
engage. That's the muscle that we need to pick out and make pop and engage a little bit more.
Mhm.
So I train movements and then use movements to engage muscle groups.
Interesting.
And then the horse starts to realize that my aids are tied more to the muscle groups than they are the movement itself.
Mm.
And through that, I can build posture. I can build roundness.
Mhm.
I can build engagement, and sideways movements guide me to that.
Mm.
So right at the moment that I'm starting to think about posture and balance and bend and softness and roundness, I'm achieving that through helping with the sideways movements to find muscles.
Mm.
It's kind of like when you're working out, or you have a good fitness coach that's helping you identify the
Mhm.
feeling of muscle groups, the feeling of your core, the feeling of your abs, the feeling of releasing and engaging the psoas in your back and in your pelvis. Mind to muscle connection, the
Mhm.
same thing for the horse. And you have to be able to make that connection so that your brain engages the right ideas. The same thing with the horse, realistically. We're making a mind to muscle engagement, a aid to muscle engagement, if you will. So that's how it becomes built in, and then you can use that to bring the horse together.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the important thing there is for riders to realize roundness doesn't come from the head and neck. It comes from the whole
Right,
body. And,
right.
I think we're seeing more and more people are becoming aware of these riders that have gotten to a certain level that have really pretty moving horses, really round through the neck and the head, but not necessarily engaged through the body.
Sure.
And so I think that the more we can talk about, no, the roundness is them sitting on the haunches, the raising of the wither,
Yep.
it when I have a horse on the lunge line and or on the line, it's not necessarily lunging. Um and they start going forward for maybe the first time. They like automatically will round through their neck.
Yeah,
And
sure.
they're
Yeah,
like, "Oh, so maybe I don't need to be doing all this micromanaging while I'm
right.
up there to achieve that result."
Right.
And then it's like, "Oh god, forward actually does create roundness. Who would have thought?" Um, so are there any misconceptions about bridalists that you hear people talk about that aren't necessarily correct?
Yeah, yeah. Um, a couple of them would be that you can't accomplish the same things that you would inside the bridle. Um, and I think that's just not true. I
Mhm,
think that there are some things that are easier. There are some things that are more difficult, but only more difficult because of lack of understanding,
mm.
not necessarily lack of ability.
Lack of understanding on the horse's part or the human's part, or both?
Human, both, but it's the human's job to educate the horse. The horse
Mhm,
isn't gonna figure it out on its own. Our job is to guide the horse to the right feelings.
mhm,
Um, so when people say that I can't accomplish the same thing or that it's not possible bridleless, you know, everything's impossible until somebody does it. It's just the way it is. Most scientific fact oftentimes started as science fiction,
mm,
um, and then it grew from there. So just because it hasn't necessarily been done yet, or you haven't seen or experienced it yet, doesn't mean it's not possible.
mhm,
So um, I do believe everything can be accomplished to the same level and the same degree that it can be in the bridleless. I do believe that to be true. So that would be the first big misconception, that we can't accomplish the same thing.
mhm.
Does it take a little bit more meticulous work? Yeah, it does. To have a horse competition ready,
Yeah.
bridleless, it's tough.
Mm,
It's tough. It takes a lot of consistency
mm,
and a lot of time and a lot of discipline. Um, I can't let it go wrong too many times. I can't let the horse
mm,
make the same mistake too many times bridleless as I could in the bridle, because in the bridle sometimes, well, I can just fix it. I can just fix it on the fly. I can make it happen. When you're out there bridleless, you can't make anything
mm,
happen. It has to be right. It has
mhm.
to be spot on. It has to be consistent. So keeping one competition ready is very, very difficult. But it's not impossible. It's
Yeah.
just difficult. So there's that. I would say, people saying that it's only for exhibition.
Mm,
It's not, it's not viable for competition. That would be another one. I don't think that's necessary. Well, we've proven at this point that it's not true.
mhm,
Have we proven that a bridleless horse can always beat a bridled horse? No, I don't think so. And certainly, I think that at high level jumpers, there are just going to be some crazy horses that are running around wild and have stupid amounts of talent and are just running through that bridle and can get the job done. I'm never going to beat them.
mhm,
I'm just never going to beat them. I don't think so. It would take a lot for me to beat them bridleless.
mm,
So in some ways, yeah, the bridled horses are going to beat me. But it's not always about winning to me.
mhm.
It's about how I ride it. So though I do want to do well and I do want to win, at the end of the day, if I walk out with a blue ribbon and a check and I won the class and I look back on that ride and I was like, that was ugly, I'm not super proud of that. Or I might, not make it in the ribbons, but I ran around that course and maybe I had a rail, or maybe I rode clean, but it was just, not as fast as everybody else. But I look back on that course and it was like, my horse and I were together on that. That makes more to me. I
Yeah.
think that's more important to me. I think it's more important to the horse because I can take that forward and the next time try to be a bit tidier, be a bit quicker, and
Mhm.
have something to work with. So I guess it's a little bit of a perspective into what competition is for sometimes. So that becomes an interesting doubt that people have. when it comes to bridalists. Um, I think sometimes there is the misconception that, oh, my horse doesn't listen to the bit, I don't have a chance of riding bridleless,
Mhm.
or my horse is hot, I don't have a chance of riding bridleless, or my horse is spooky, I shouldn't ride bridleless. And I would say that all those things aren't necessarily true. All horses oftentimes push a reset button when you take that bridle off. You have a different horse altogether as you're working with them. So I wouldn't say that all of that is necessarily true. And I would tell people to, with wisdom and with safety, give yourself a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, give yourself a shot at it. You might be surprised.
What hope do you have for the future of equestrian competition?
Ooh, oh man, that's a good question. I was getting a little bit dark. Turn the light on for you. Um, that's a very good question. I think that in the riding culture, we are starting to see, in some ways, a very good shift.
Mhm,
I think people are gaining a little bit of boldness to point out atrocities
mhm,
that may be happening. And I understand that as trainers and as riders, this is a difficult game and it's an emotional game
mhm,
oftentimes. And we make mistakes and
mhm.
we do things we're not proud of. And there have been times where I've corrected horses in ways that I look back on and I'm not proud of. I will 100% admit that. Yes, there is a time to be firm. These are big and dangerous animals, and it is necessary sometimes to be very clear that this is not safe,
Mhm.
and you have to be a good citizen. When it's fair, you can be firm and fair at the same time. Um, but I believe that there's a shift in the competition world, in the riding world for the better, that is saying that people are realizing there's a lot of people in this world that want to shut us down altogether,
Mhm.
that don't want us to ride horses, don't want us to
Yeah,
compete horses,
yeah,
that they want, there's a large portion of people that want to see this go away, and we're not helping. you know we're not helping ourselves by scandal and abuse and atrocities that are coming out. So I think people are waking up to the fact that if we want to have this in our future, we have to do better. We
yeah,
have to find ways to be better, to do right by the horse. They don't owe us anything. So why can't we try to do this in a way that um, is a little bit more fun for them?
yeah,
You know. Um, so that would be my hope, that we continue to pursue a horse culture and a horse world that puts the integrity of the horse's body and mind above the ribbon and the check. Um, that's really hard to do sometimes, especially when it's your business and you're relying on that check for money. It's really hard to put that there, but I would hope that there's people out there that would support those who want to do it better, who
mm,
want to do it right. Not just support those who are running around and winning, but supporting those who are producing good animals with kind ways of doing things. So that's what I hope for. That's what I wish, and I think in some ways that's what I want to accomplish with the bridalist, is to continue to push us down that road,
mhm,
to continue to push us in a way that says, hey, we can do better. We
yeah,
can do better. And I don't mean to say that arrogantly either. I mean, some people could hear that and say, well, this guy's putting himself above everybody else. And that's not what I want. That's not what I intend.
mhm,
This is hard and this is a struggle, and I go into the ring, and just the other day I was doing, I did a meter 30 round with Lyric at hits, and I came around the corner and there was a simple oxer that just had some fill with a big symbol on it, and Lyric took one look at that and he said, I'm not jumping it. And that was difficult. It's frustrating, and we came back around to it and we jumped it, but you know it makes it hard to feel like it's possible sometimes, but I want to get it done. and I want to show that it's possible, and I want to show how brilliant this horse is. You know, he's such an incredible guy, and he's such an incredible horse. I want people to see the brilliance of it and be inspired to think outside the box. That's really what I'm looking for.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners how they can follow along with you and Lyric's journey and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Facebook and Instagram, you can find me, Brendan Wise. I think it's Brendan Wise Equestrian on Instagram. You can follow me and Lyric there. You know, my partner and who a lot of this, you know, bridalist jumping started with, Melanie Ferrio and her horse Wings, who are a huge inspiration to the bridalist community and the international community. You can follow us at Unbridled Wings as well. Look up Unbridled Wings on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and online, unbridledwings.com. You can read her and Wings' story, which I'm so privileged to be a part of. You know, you can also find we make our neck ropes. A lot of people ask us, you know,
Hmm.
where do you get your neck rope? You know, what do you guys use? What materials that you use? And we experimented with so many different things for such a long time, and we came up with something that worked for us. And people were like, "We need it. We have to have it." So we started manufacturing and producing them. So you can get them on our website as well, unbridledwings.com. So yeah, those are really places to look for. Look up Brendan Wise on Facebook and Instagram, and look up Unbridled Wings, and see what's going on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.